Welcome to the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt, Carson.
And today we are joined by a special guest. He is a friend of my family, my former neighbor, and just an all-around great guy. And we're really excited to have him on the podcast today, joining us and talking with us about some of his story and concepts. It's Jon Reiners. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate you guys having me. I've been following the podcast since its inception and really enjoy the content you guys are putting out. So happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. You yourself have some content that you put out every week. You have a blog called Navel Gazing. So it was at navel-gazing.com. Yep. We'll just plug it up front so people can search as they go, because we'll be talking about some of the articles and concepts that you're doing. But
perfect.
One that really caught my eye, and we were chatting about earlier, and I was like, oh man, Jon, you got to come on the podcast and share your story on this, is live like you were living, from survivor to thriver. You want to kind of give us the story and kind of discuss the concepts from there?
Sure. Yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a musician, kind of semi-pro. I've done a lot of bands throughout the years and never was a country music fan. But lo and behold, in Nebraska, you play country music, it's kind of the deal. So there's always this song out there called Live Like You Were Dying, which I thought was really cheesy and kind of just not that great. But I kind of had my own brush with death and had a seizure in November of 21 that led to a brain cancer diagnosis. And so kind of an uncertain outcome. And so the post was just kind of my attempt to say, you don't have to wait to live like you're dying. Like, you can live now, be present in the moment, be in the here and now, and focus on what matters now rather than waiting until you have one of those wake up calls.
Yeah, we've talked to quite a few different entrepreneurs and business leaders and people, and it always seems like there's a moment in their life where there is that wake up call, right? There is that moment to where you just realize, okay, it's now or never. Has there ever been a moment in your life, even before that, where you really thought like, okay, now it's the moment to take action? Like, what are some of the cues you've experienced going through your past that have really led to some change or some motivation and action to do more?
Yeah. So I think we all have those moments, right? You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and say, oh, I got to start working out, or, you just have that job you dread, and you get up and it's like, okay, no more. I got to do something about this. But how many times do we say that? Oh, I should, and it doesn't happen. So while this was going down, I was going through another period of upheaval in my life. My 25-year marriage was coming to an end as well at the same time. And so I was kind of in that state of already like trying to figure out my life. I started to get a plan together, and then wham, plans changed again. So that was really kind of the big moment in my life. But there have been others, obviously, as you go, but the smaller moments. But the big drive definitely was giving a second lease on life that, wasn't a guarantee in the moment, being able to come back from that fight.
So I think one of the overarching themes of this is, going through divorce and seizure that leads to brain cancer, and that's a lot for anybody.
Yeah.
And I think the theme is that you kind of transformed what could be crushing circumstances. Any of those circumstances are crushing. You had them all happen to you, and you turn that into something positive. So when did you start blogging? I started scrolling through your blog and going to the older section, and they just kept going. It's impressive.
So I did a little bit of blogging years ago, probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And it's always something that I enjoyed and wanted to keep up with, but just never really made the time for. So it was very sporadic and then just kind of not at all. More recently, I'd done some freelance content writing work, like website descriptions, guest blogs that were very structured around, SEO type focus. But really hadn't, that's kind of soulless. It really is just generating content. It's not anything I was interested in. It was something to make a little side money. And so I kind of gave that up when the divorce came down. And then, strangely enough, cancer was the thing that really changed my focus. Like, with the divorce and loss in my family and all the uncertainty around that, I was in a funk. And the cancer diagnosis just woke me up. And I just made up my mind early on, as soon as we knew that it was a fight I could win, or at least had a chance of winning. Early on, I just knew if I was going to go through it, I wanted to grow through it. And I knew I had a lot of growth that I needed to do to figure out what the rest of my life was going to look like, post divorce and now post cancer. And so I just really dug in and started focusing on that. So blogging kind of came about as a piece of that. I really started thinking I was going to write a book when I did a bone marrow transplant. So I was in the hospital for a little less than a month, a few days less than a month. And I knew that I had to do something to keep from losing my mind while that was going on. So I thought I'd write, but it got a little dark and it kind of started sending me to a dark place. So I gave it up there, but I knew writing was something I wanted to do. So I really started looking at blogging, and I started that probably like early February. I launched my own site. So I started with that, and I thought, I'll set up a blog site. And then all of a sudden you have to learn web development and all these other things. As I'm sure you guys know full well, launching a podcast, like podcasting is probably the smallest part. Writing's kind of the same way in some regards, for sure. So it took a little longer to get going, but I've been weekly since early February with a couple of misses. Had a couple of down weeks. But
through blogging and reflecting, it looks like there's all sorts of concepts that you've been really diving into. And I want to stick with that, how to live like you were living, because there's really amazing points that you did on that. So kind of my first question is, what was some of those things that you started to do as you were talking about those darker days, darker hours, as you had those challenges come up to you? What are some of the concepts that you discovered and are able to share with people?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones for me is just really was appreciating the moments. The day before my seizure, my band played October 31st, 2021. We played a show up in the Sandhills, and it was a late night that turned into an early morning. I couldn't sleep, so I just got up and thought, I'll just drive home. So I left before dark, and one of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen came up in front of me, and I never would stop and take a picture. And I don't know what possessed me that day, but I stopped and took a picture of that sunrise. Those are things that I just didn't appreciate, barely probably even noticed, because I was always going from point A to point B, checking off things off my task list. And man, when I went through my cancer diagnosis, that sunset rise picture, that was my background on my phone. Just appreciating those little moments that really can mean a lot. And even going through some bad things. I mean, my favorite days, or my favorite times of the day when I was doing the bone marrow transplant, was I get to go down to the healing garden, and I'd take my journal or a book, and I'd go get a Starbucks and just go sit outside. And it might have been hotter than Hades, or it might have been windy, or it might have been a little chilly, but feeling outside is a blessing. And so there's always something to be grateful for. I think that's my biggest takeaway from that whole thing, is regardless of your circumstances, there's meaning and there's something you can be grateful for.
I love that, because we've talked about gratitude a lot just recently on this podcast, and it's a personal journey I'm on. I guess fortunately I didn't have to have a seizure, to start on my gratitude journey. But it's been really life changing. And as Tanner alluded to, is I've had a hard week. And nothing dramatic, nothing crazy. My life will not be turned upside down. Just a really rough week at work, that sort of situation. But I did notice instantly that my conscious thoughts of trying to be gracious and be, hey, I'm glad I have this in my life, and this and this and that, it dropped off instantly, and I went instantly negative. What would you say about that? It seems really easy to practice gratitude when life's good, but you managed to practice gratitude when life wasn't good. And how did you find that ambition to find positivity in a very negative situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know that I have a great answer. For me, I knew that I had to find it. I had to look for it. And it was, there were dark days. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't all moonbeams and rainbows. There were some rough times, and in addition to that, the treatment and that, I had this whole legal battle going on with the divorce through the entirety of that, that actually outlasted the brain cancer fight. So, when I first was diagnosed, I couldn't run the fingers on my left hand. I couldn't pick up a cup. I mean, I could move them, but I couldn't control them. And that's the guitar hand, so that was devastating for me. And so it was hard not to think about that coming back. Early on in treatment, that went away, but it was always on my mind, still on my mind today. There's moments if I get a muscle spasm on my left side or something, I'll be like, oh, wait a second, but you just have to focus on the positive. I think it's the only option. It's either that or you go negative. And I truly believe that you find what you're looking for in this life. And if you're looking for positive things, you'll find them. If you're looking for the negative, no matter how good your life is, you can find the negative. It's there too. It's a matter what you focus on.
In your article, you mentioned that's related to what you're just talking about, how you really need to stop living in the past and how holding on to your past hurts and robs you of today's joys and tomorrow's promises. How are you finding to best implement that? Because I personally have issues myself of constantly, especially in the shower. It is by far the one of the most reflective and worst times sometimes where if I'm really, to be honest, and I go over and find a lot of stress there, surprisingly. And maybe it's because it's one of those only times where you're kind of just really alone and you don't have a phone to distract you or some other things and you have to kind of come into your own realities. But how do you kind of stop living in those and try to be more present and try to be more positive to the future, especially in a time where the future isn't promised and is very uncertain?
Yeah. And I think that's huge. I think for me, part of it was knowing that I had boys that were counting on me still through this, even though they're, teenagers and early 20s, kind of on their own, but still not quite. And, being around for them. So being focused for them, I think, is huge. And when we are focused on the things in the past, either the wrongs that people have done to us or the wrongs that I've hurt people too, I'm no divorce is one-sided, right? I mean, there's things that I should have done differently. And it's really easy for me to sit around and just focus on those and think about what a horrible person I am. But that robs the people in my life today of the person that I should be for them. So sometimes it's just a matter of taking that break and saying, that's not my life now. That was what it was. I have to let it go. I have to forgive people. I have to forgive myself, and move on. It's hard, but it can be done. And a lot of it's just interrupting that thought cycle when you recognize it happening, I think.
I wanted to kind of go and talk about, because Jon, I'll just be blunt. You seem like a very introspective, very thoughtful person. We're only 15 minutes into this and I'm already really enjoying this conversation. This is a weird way to ask this question, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a better way. Have you always been this thoughtful, Jon?
No, I would say not really. I used to be a very emotionally driven, hot-headed, reactive guy, if I'm being 100% truthful. And I had to learn to temper that. And it caused me issues in a lot of areas in life, not the least of which was my marriage early on. I worked hard to try to correct that, but, it was what it was. By the time I made those changes, I think it was too far gone. And, but no, I don't think I'd always been that introspective. Feelings were something that was scary for me. I remember early on when it was looking like I was going to have a divorce, I had a friend tell me, you have to process those feelings. And I'm like, what does that even mean? I have no idea what you're saying to me right now. And it took me a long time to really think about how to do that, and still don't have it all figured out by any means, but a little closer today than I used to be.
How is it that you identify the things that matter?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the biggest one for me is my faith. And that's something that I wasn't really in a place that I was comfortable being in heading into an uncertain health outcome. So I really focused on that. I dug into a lot of reading and journaling and devotionals around that. And then aside from that, my boys, my family is huge. And just the hope that there was a future out there. I truly believe when the whole thing went down with the seizure, I was sitting on my desk and 2 fingers on my left hand just started twitching. And I remember sitting there just looking at them like, willing them to stop, and they wouldn't stop twitching. And I thought, that's kind of odd. Maybe I should go get it checked out. But so I stopped off at the bathroom next door, and then I was going to go find a nurse, and I locked myself in that bathroom, and then everything started shaking. And to this day, I don't know how I got out of the bathroom, like, to get the knob done. So I just kind of felt early on, like, there's a reason that I made it through that, and I was meant for something, and that gave me some hope. Still trying to figure that out to some degree, but probably will be as long as I'm here.
Wyatt and I, about a week ago, were going to be recording a podcast discussing resiliency. And of course, that was when we had technical issues that didn't allow us to record that. But I thought, well, actually, maybe this is a perfect opportunity. And talking about how the world kind of aligns to different things, I was like, well, Jon's going to be on the following week. And who better to ask about resiliency, who is someone, who has overcome so much. So is there any specific concepts or things that you have found around that topic on how you can kind of persevere and overcome stuff when things do get hard at whatever level? Because from being consistent to writing a blog every week all the way to dealing with something that is potentially life-threatening, I assume a lot of the principles can be the same.
Yeah, I think so too. I think a lot of it is discipline. A lot of it's focus. It's leaning on people that, everybody needs a support network. And so I don't know if you probably know, but with the seizure, there's you can't drive yourself anymore. Doctor's order that comes with that. So for 90 days, I couldn't drive. So I went from being this, at least for my age, a pretty fit, very active guy, to not even being able to drive myself back and forth to work. And then as that progressed with the cancer, PICC line, a 10-pound weight lift limit. So I couldn't lift anything over 10 pounds. So there was a lot of things like that that were hard. For me, it was huge. It was tough on my pride when I'm like, hey, I need to call some guys and help move a couch. And that, Tanner, I know you were one of the guys that helped me move some stuff. And that, it's tough. It's hard for me to ask for that. So I really had to get over myself and over my ego with that, and be okay leaning on people too. And the pastor from our church told me, when we deny people the chance to help us, we deny them giving their gift of their service. And that really resonated with me. And it's something that I've tried to do, on the backside of this is giving that gift back, paying it forward, paying it backwards, whatever that is. Because I believe that's a piece of it too, that is really important to me, and is something that I really want to hit on is, I wasn't the guy that was maybe, as likely to just be as helpful as I could have been or should have been. And I have those instances where I recognize I could have been more helpful to people. And so trying to make those changes moving forward as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've too have been trying to do more with local communities and nurturing friendships and stuff like that. I feel like today we live so much of our lives online, and I see this with all sorts of people where they're talking to people, but they're not real people in the sense that they actually really know them. They're avatars online on Facebook or Twitter, or watching content from people that they've never met or never interacted with. And they don't have those strong bonds with people where if they did need to call them, have somebody who could move a couch for them, or they need a ride to do something, they don't have strong enough relationships or ingrained enough in their community or know anyone in their community to really ask without the barrier of doing a lot of building. And that is something that the more I spend time, with friends and with people in the neighborhood or people in the community or local business environments, I'm realizing, I'm like, man, I've been neglecting this part, and it is probably one of the most valuable things that I'm finding now personally in my life.
Yeah, that was really hit home for me so my seizure happened in November of 21, but in May of 21, I lost a good friend to glioblastoma, brain cancer. When this first came down and they first told me in North Platte that I had cancer, the surgeon told me he was almost certain it was glioblastoma, which I took to mean as a death sentence. I've since found out that a few people survive it, but not many. But thankfully it was lymphoma. But So that friend, I'd driven by the house so many times and looked over and thought, I wonder how his life's doing. I should really get over. I should take some food. I should do this. I should do that. And I kept driving every single time. And it took me having brain cancer for her to bringing me food for us to reconnect. And that just, it kind of crushed me. Like, that's not the person I want to be. And so that was really a defining moment for me that, okay, I need to make changes to get through this.
It's something that, as Tanner alluded to, that kind of that genuine interaction, it's just kind of missing. And I noticed it, I think kind of late, not that it's irretrievable, but I kind of sat down one day and I thought, man, I don't know if I have a lot of really deep friendships anymore. You know, I do my job and I have my job people. I can't even, we never hang out or anything like that. And then I have my family, and then, and I have my neighbors who I'm good friends with, but it kind of sat back and was like, if someone had to ask me, Wyatt, who's your best friend? I don't know if I can answer that right now. And that put me in a really difficult position and really made me start evaluating my life. And I said, why not? And I've always heard this, oh, it's really hard to make friends as an adult male, especially, and blah, 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 blah. And that feels like a little bit of a cop-out to me, because if we took 30 seconds and really evaluated why, it's probably because I didn't foster those friendships, right?
I heard a story recently talking about the difference kind of between men and women and the sacrifices we make. And one of the things is oftentimes men will make sacrifices for their careers much earlier. And I kind of found myself kind of falling into this trap where, okay, we need to go on this business trip and we need to do all this stuff and earn money. And we sacrifice time with things like our family and our children and do that because we have to earn the money. We have to go do this stuff. And oftentimes we sacrifice, the true relationships and the true encounters. And then when later in life you go to retire, and this was kind of what the story was alluding to, you don't have that core foundation of relationships that someone else would through that. And so your retirement time is really you're alone because you don't have real people around you that you can call and trust on. How are you building new relationships that matter going forward? Because as someone who's at a different stage in their life, that's something I'm struggling with quite a bit, and I would really interested to know.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that question for me is, as the cancer thing came down, I was also going through the end of that marriage, and I kind of bagged a lot of my guy friendships. I passed on a lot of invites to go hunting or fishing because I was trying to save my marriage for a number of years. And so I didn't really have a lot of guy friends. We had a lot of couple friends. And so navigating the fallout of that and who's actually my friend, not that they had to be one or the other, but like there was always that little bit of like, are they really in my corner on this? At least with the cancer thing, I wasn't asking or looking for anybody to take sides in the divorce, but I had that whole dynamic going on at the same time. So I felt like in some ways I was kind of starting from ground zero. And, even with my brothers, we never had bad relationships, but we grew distant as everybody starts with families and everything. And, we're all within an hour of each other. And we still kind of let that happen. And that's as much on me as it is on them. And we've had those conversations now, and we're working to keep that in a different state than it was before all this. But it is a maintenance thing, and it is hard. I mean, it's just like anything else. It's difficult, especially when you get raising family and trying to grow a career or a business. It's tough, but it's important.
A theme that I've noticed in a lot of your articles, you don't write from a perspective of my life was crazy, hectic, chaotic, and kind of just sucked. And now I'm getting to the realization that, I could make things better, and I could learn to love myself, forgive myself. It's not about realizing things after the fact. Your style of writing really starts at the beginning of, hey, you can build up these skill sets to make yourself a bit more resilient so that when that inevitable shoe does drop, if it happens, bad things happen to people all the time, right? you have a few more tools in your tool belt, so to speak. So what would you say are some of those, if you were talking to Tanner or I or someone even younger, what would be something you would wish people would develop to help kind of armor themselves from that shoe drop?
Yeah, I think there's big things you can do. There's small things you can do, right? I mean, exposing yourself to a little bit of discomfort. Um, uh, Full disclosure, like 10 minutes before we started tonight, I was like, why did I say I'd do this? Like, this isn't comfortable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so just as something as, I know a lot of people wouldn't say it was small, and I wasn't saying it was small 10 minutes ago, but something as small as agreeing to do something like this um, can be a little bit of that training, just in like putting yourself in a place that's a little bit beyond your edge and outside of your comfort zone, builds up a little bit of that resilience. And that can be big things too. I mean, I know people who do like the Tough Mudder, from a physical perspective, and these grueling physical challenges. It could be a lot of people talk about cold showers. I'm not um, one who particularly enjoys that, and don't really do that, but I know that's one that a lot of people propose as well. So I think anything like that you can do that just builds a little resilience in your thinking and your body, whatever that needs to be, helps. Because the real only guarantee we have in life is we don't know what's coming for us, but we're all going to have those moments that are going to knock us on our butt, big ones and small ones.
One of the things that you've talked about in one of your most recent articles is self-talk. And this goes in, again, with the previous question and aligned with what can people do to arm themselves. We always find that we ourselves are often our worst enemy. What is some of the concepts and ideas around self-talk that you've discovered, that you found helpful, and that you think would be valuable for other people to start implementing in their own lives too?
I think the biggest one is just really interrupting that train when you see it leaving the station. I used to be the worst at that. The constant rattling around in my brain of labels that were just mean to myself, if I'm being fully transparent. I would never speak to somebody else like that. Why would I do that to myself? And then you believe it. And then I think that there is something to be said for your mind bringing that to you. Or if you believe that you're not lovable, then you set yourself up and screw yourself out of love, right? Or if you believe that you're not talented, you'll find a way to sabotage yourself. So it's the words you use to talk to yourself matter immensely.
So I'm loving this conversation, guys. This is my jam. I've been on this journey to express myself and be more vulnerable in my interactions. So I'm loving this stuff, but I'm going to change the pace just a little bit. I'm going to go back to your blog, Jon.
Yeah.
My first question for you is, are you going to write a book? What's your plans for this blog? Let's go down.
I've thought about a book. I had some ideas, but honestly, a lot of it's come out in the blog now. I could see that happening at some point. I don't really have any plans solid on the table to do that at this point, but it's something that I've always had an interest in. And so we'll see. Right now, my plan is just to keep writing weekly and ideally build, a significant-ish following. And yeah, I could see myself potentially transitioning. I wouldn't be opposed to transitioning to a full-time writing gig at some point if the opportunity was there.
Sure. How long have you been, how long has this blog been up and running?
I started in like early February. I started working on it in January. And then it took me about 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, to get the website up and all of that. But
So you're 6-7 months in to this, and you have a significant backlog already. It's really impressive. And then this is something Tanner and I have learned is we're on this episode 42, 43, somewhere around there of this podcast. And sometimes, some weeks, it's a slog. Sometimes I'm looking at my clock and it's like 7:30 on a Tuesday night. And I know our recording time is 8 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, I'm just so busy, or I'm so tired, or blah, 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 blah. And we've talked about this before, Tanner. One of the strongest things is we're accountable, and we're accountable to each other, and we're accountable to our audience. And how do you hold yourself accountable? How do you find it? And don't get, if you mentioned, some weeks you've skipped or you missed or you were too busy. I missed like the last 2 weeks. Poor Tanner has really carried a lot of weight for me lately. Things happen, but how do you keep yourself motivated? What are you getting out of this that keeps you going?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's a struggle at times, right? One of the things that I did when I decided I was going to do this and was going to do it weekly is I sat down, I planned out a whole year's worth of blog topics because that's what hung me up before. I said I blogged in the past, but 3-4 weeks in, 3-4 posts in, I'm like, what am I going to write about this time? And coming up with those topics is a struggle. I'm assuming it's probably kind of a bit the same in the podcast world. So this time I sat down, I'm like, I'm going to plan out my whole year. I'm going to get a whole year's worth of topics and did keyword research so I could kind of pull in some SEO stuff with it, the whole 9 yards. And then a few months in, I'm like, yeah, I don't want to write about that. Yeah, I'm not sure that's the right one. And then all of a sudden, this back half of the year, it's like every time it's like, what am I going to write about? But what I'm finding is me having that weekly Monday morning drop of a blog post pushes me to continue to do my reading, to listen to the podcasts and read the blogs that inspire and motivate me. And that's where ideas are sparked almost every week. It seems like anymore I'm going to write about that. Or as I hear things, I'll put, just the notes app in my iPad or iPhone, excuse me. I'll just put in blog topic ideas there. But part of it is, I really am writing as much for me as anybody. And so not only the writing, but also it keeps me focused on the content that I need to consume to continue to focus on creating content as well.
Yeah, that's something that we do here in this podcast is it has to be topics that I would want to listen to and do. And one of the things that we've described it as, it's a lot of the information I wish I would have had when I was 20. So I wouldn't have had to make a lot of the same mistakes or done it a little bit better.
Absolutely. Well, Jon, we're nearing the end of our time here. Of course, we want everyone to who listens to this, go check out your blog, navel-gazing.com. It's phenomenal writing. It's a quick 3-4 minute reads each blog post, but each one is filled with awesome, impactful material about being vulnerable, about taking care of yourself, about appreciating yourself, and to strengthen really your resiliency in life. But before we go, last thoughts. We talked about your blog and where you can go with that, but you're also a professional and you're a guitarist and you're a blogger and you're a copywriter. And my word, Jon, what's the future hold for you?
I'm excited to find out.
Great answer.
Still trying to figure that out a little bit, but I know I'm here for a reason. I know I came through everything I did for a reason, and I'm looking forward to seeing where I can take things.
Well, with that, again, we'll finish up. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I know we've had a few little technical hiccups here and there, but I feel like it was just such a deep and profound conversation, and I learned a lot. So thanks for taking the time and joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Thanks for having me.
And with that, we will see everybody next week. So, bye.